Good morning to you and welcome to today's webinar, Putting It All Together, a Diagnosis to Adulthood Guide for Navigating the Disability World, presented by True North Disability Planning's founder and consultant, Eric Jorgensen. My name is Jeff Stauffer, Community Relations Director with Elville and Associates, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. This is an annual presentation that we offer with Eric. We keep bringing him back because he's just so darn good, and we appreciate his time today. So welcome to those that are new to our educational webinar series and also to those that are frequent attendees. We encourage your general questions at any time, so please note them in the questions panel on your screen, and we will pause periodically throughout the presentation to address them. More case-specific questions and personal questions may be best discussed offline and in a consultation with Eric. Your questions add value and help the presentation. They help others learn, so please don't be shy in posing your questions at any time. You also received the presentation slides yesterday by email from me to take notes on them if you wish. The presentation is also available in the section marked handouts on your panel on your screen to download at any time. Also, welcome to our professionals on today's presentation. For CFPs, CPAs, and most other professionals, you may receive 1.5 continuing education hours for attending today. And on my end, per my attendance records requirements, if applicable and you have an ID number that you'd like to share, please send it over as soon as possible, as I'll be submitting the CE hours for approval tomorrow morning. Everyone will also receive a post-webinar feedback email right after the presentation, and we ask that you please take just a couple minutes to fill out this very simple survey to offer us your thoughts about today's presentation. Here at Elville and Associates, we want to be a resource to you and your families planning needs, so certainly reach out to me with any questions at any time, and we'll be happy to be a resource to you as you see fit now or in the future. So it is my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Mr. Eric Jorgensen of True North Disability Planning. Eric has been helping families with loved ones with intellectual and developmental disabilities since he retired from the Navy in 2012. He was widowed the same year he retired, and it was his frustration with the difficulty of navigating services that led him to create the roles of consultant and IDD navigator through what has now been rebranded into his company known as True North Disability Planning. In addition to directly serving his clients through one-on-one consultations, Eric offers many free and low-cost resources on his website and has some special discounts available to clients and friends of Elville and Associates he'll mention during his presentation. Eric and his son William live in Frederick. So Eric, it's great to have you back. Welcome. Also, thank you as well for your service to our country. We certainly do appreciate that. And I will now turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And we'll get the discount out of the way, and I'll mention again at the end of the presentation. So anybody who's listening to this now or because they're viewing the recording, if they go to the website, my website, and they purchase a roadmap or a state disability guide using the code Elville, E-L-V-I-L-L-E, as a discount, they'll get 25% off of whatever they're purchasing from the website. The only thing really for sale there is going to be the roadmaps. Most of the other content is free that you can download, but you type in the Elville and it should give you a 25% discount. If it doesn't, email me, eric@specialneedsnavigator.us, so I can make sure I get it fixed. Now, for the reason you guys are here, I want to talk today about the sort of cradle to grave when you have a child with a disability. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to be specific to Maryland, but not all of it. And so if you're attending from out of state, I will make note if another state has something similar, or if there's things you can look for in other states. Generally speaking, everything I'm going to talk about today is available regardless of where you live in the country. So let's get started with where I think the current state of affairs is. And this is everything I'm going to talk about today is coming from my own personal point of view. It's what led me to starting the company. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm really trying to create a new category because what I see right now is, as you can see on screen, we have lawyers who are saying they do special needs estate planning, and we have financial planners who say they're doing special needs planning. And it's getting to be really hard to understand, at least from my point of view, what is special needs planning. I would like to see more people, more professionals say, I do estate planning for people with disabilities. Now, again, attorneys, they work with special needs trusts, so it makes sense that they use the term special needs, because that is how Social Security recognizes whether or not a trust is the correct type of tool to make sure you're not going to have your assets and income, the assets that are held by the trust, counted. So special needs has to be used for special needs trust because that's how Social Security looks at it. But when you're a parent looking for a special needs planner, it's really important to understand what that planner you're working with does. Are they doing an estate planning? Are they doing an estate plan for you? Are they doing guardianship? Are you hiring them because they're going to sell you life insurance? Are they doing a financial plan? What are you really getting from them when they say they're doing special needs planning? The goal of this presentation is to give you a better understanding of where I want to see disability planning go. It's so much more than just getting a financial plan or getting an estate plan. And before I go on, I want to stress getting a financial plan and an estate plan are very, very necessary. You may not need to have all of your money under management, but you should absolutely have a good idea where your money is going, how much your son or daughter is going to need after you're gone to provide for themselves, and how that money is going to get to them. You should also know, do they need a guardian? Are you doing supported decision making? If you do need a guardian, who's going to be the guardian after you're gone? How are you going to provide them the money that they're going to need to provide to support themselves? Because Social Security is not going to be enough, generally speaking, to provide for somebody after they turn 18 and they're on their own, whether because you're no longer alive to care for them, or because they don't qualify for any state or federal support. So you're going to have to make sure they have money available to them. And where are you going to put it? Generally speaking, that's going to go in a special needs trust, which is why you need an estate planning attorney. It's also important for your own estate, while you're alive planning. You should have a power of attorney for yourself. You should have healthcare proxy. You should have all of those things that a lawyer can really help you put together. So I'm not discounting the importance of either estate planning or financial planning, but I think there needs to be another category to fill in the gaps left between both of those. Disability planning really should, and I believe will, fill in the gaps of what state benefits am I eligible for, what should I be applying for, how does Medicaid, Medicare, and my private health insurance work together, all of those things. And it's not a category that I aim to fill by myself. I'm seeing more and more professionals out there that are coming in to help me fill this area. One person in Maryland who does a really great job in terms of helping people apply for benefits and see what's out there for them is Rebecca Rubin. So, she can definitely do and does a lot of hand-holding when you're trying to apply for DDA benefits and things like that. This timeline is it's in the handout, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over it. Today, I am going to touch on the different stages that we as parents are encountering with our children. What happens when you get the diagnosis, what happens when they go into school, elementary, middle, high school, what happens after school, all of those things. Each area of life brings its own challenges. I am going to share everything in the hopes that you worry about the stage of life you're in and not get too far ahead of yourself worrying about what's coming. So if your child is 3 or 4 years old, I don't want you worrying about guardianship. Conversely, if your child is 17 and you haven't done anything that I'm going to talk about for the diagnosis in elementary school, maybe you have to do a little more groundwork to get yourself on par before the child leaves high school. But take all of this into account with how old is your child, where are you now, what have you already accomplished, and what, if anything, is new to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the diagnosis, and this is getting better, especially for those on the autism spectrum. It is coming earlier and earlier. The exception still seems to be for those who are female and those people of color. It seems like there's still a delay of 2 to 5 years, depending which study you're reading, in terms of getting the diagnosis. And what's not clear is that because it's a lack of access? Is it culture? Is it some other reason? But there does seem to be a delay in getting that diagnosis, especially for autism, for people of color and females. When you get the diagnosis, the first thing you want to do, whether you're a professional or the family, is connect with resources. And some of those are going to be local resources. Other ones are going to be national. Like I have on here, the National Down Syndrome Society, Autism Speaks. NORD is the National Organization of Rare Diseases, because there are families out there whose children may be one of 300 with a diagnosis, and they don't really know what to do. They don't have any resources available. They're not sure where to start, or they may even be having trouble just getting a diagnosis because the doctors don't know what to do. So referring them or reaching out to the National Organization of Rare Disease could be a great start for yourself. I would also say, in Maryland especially, when you get a diagnosis, be it Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, autism, any of the intellectual developmental disabilities, you'll want to apply for DDA Medicaid waiver. In Maryland, there's an autism-specific waiver. It's called the autism waiver. You call an 800 number, you give the Social Security number, you get signed up. There is about a 13 to 15-year waiting list last time I checked, but that is not a reason to not call, right? I mean, at any given time, a state could decide they're going to make getting somebody off the waiting list a priority and push money towards it. If they do that and you're not on the waiting list, you're screwed. So, I am seeing states around the country that are saying, these waiting lists are ridiculous. We're going to take some of this money that we're getting from the federal government, and we are going to really work hard at reducing this waiting list and getting it down to be under more manageable levels. Again, the only way that you are going to be able to benefit from that is if you are on the waiting list. So in Maryland, that's going to the DDA website and signing up for DDA services, and for the autism waiver, it's calling the 1-800 number and getting your name on the waiting list. When you apply for DDA, usually what happens is within 30 days, a coordinator of community services, a CCS, is going to reach out to you to schedule time to come out and evaluate your child. When they come out to evaluate your child, that is not the time for you to sing your child's praises and say everything that they can do. Now, I don't want you being melodramatic, and I don't want you making anything up. But what you do need to do is imagine what your child experience would be like if you or your spouse or the child's other parent were not available to provide support. What would that child's life be like? And that is what you need to describe to the CCS, because that CCS is going to be functioning as a case manager to determine what level of support your child needs. And again, I don't want you making anything up. I don't want you faking it. I don't want you exaggerating, but I do want you to explain as clearly as possible just how much support you are providing your child on a day-to-day basis. It's important because this is how the funding is going to be allocated as your child gets older. It's also important to get put on a waiver in Maryland, because even if you're approved for, in air quotes, future need, meaning you're not going to get any support right now, should something happen to you to where you can no longer continue caring for the child, then your child will be moved up into either crisis or crisis resolution, meaning they'll have a higher priority towards getting that support in place. And again, this is all stuff you can do right after you find out you have the diagnosis. It's simple, but it's not easy. It is a lot of work, but it is not, I don't feel it's overly complicated. I think some of the paperwork can be very burdensome because there is a lot of, it can be a lot of paperwork to fill out. It may feel like, why are you asking me this? If you are not on Medicaid yet, that's fine, because the only time your child has to be on Medicaid is when they start receiving DDA services. So if your child is 5 and you check the block, my child is not on Medicaid, that is not going to automatically disqualify you from getting DDA. So don't let that limit you from, don't let that prevent you from applying for the Medicaid waiver. Applying for supplemental security income, SSI, I'm not a huge fan of people with children under the age of 18 applying, because it's so much harder to get approved. When you apply for a child under the age of 18, Social Security is looking at the parent's assets and income to determine if the child qualifies. And even though oftentimes in a 2-parent household, one parent is probably a stay-at-home parent being a caregiver, especially if your child has significant needs, that other parent is probably still making too much to qualify for SSI. If you're in a really tight spot, then by all means apply. I'm certainly not telling you not to. I just want to manage your expectation and help you understand it can be very, very difficult to get SSI for a minor child. There's also something called Rare and Expensive Case Management, or REM, in Maryland. And again, this is going to be it's going to be an individual by individual basis. So if your child has a rare diagnosis or has a lot of complex medical needs, I would suggest you reach out and apply for Rare and Expensive Case Management and see what the state tells you. This may be the first time you're ever hearing of this. I don't know who the normal referrers are. I think it's normally the schools. So if you're homeschooling, maybe you haven't gotten a referral. But if you know somebody whose child seems like they have very complex medical needs, by all means, tell them about REM and try to help them apply for it. And the same thing if you're a professional. If you're a professional and you're working with a family and they're saying our child is experiencing delays, they're not talking, whatever. And then in the next breath, they're saying, but, he's a boy, so we're going to, they'll grow into it. Or, if they have a daughter, maybe what you can do is help them by sharing some information about how autism typically presents in girls. So that's where you can help pediatricians get the information out there by sharing it with your clients. Because that's part of the problem is a lot of families are looking for, well, this is how boys present. My daughter's not doing that, so must not have autism. I'm oversimplifying. I understand it's not quite that simple, but it is clear that there is a breach or a degree of variance between when boys are diagnosed and when girls are diagnosed, and when Caucasians are diagnosed and when people of color are diagnosed. So if you are serving any of those populations that are diagnosed at a far less frequent rate, this could be a great opportunity for you to come in and make introductions or help them find resources, talk them through maybe their concerns about what the diagnosis actually means. I don't want my child labeled. This is where you can really help parents understand the benefits of what that diagnosis will bring. The understanding their finances, the financial plan. Again, I'm not suggesting you go out and hire a $5,000 financial planner. If you need that because you've got a very complex situation, great. But it could just as easily be sitting down with a nonprofit debt counselor or You know, a lot of these nonprofits will have people that can help you understand what's going on and not necessarily help you do a budget, but more of a lot of individuals who have this diagnosis often need these types of therapies. When they get these types of therapies, they are or are not covered by insurance, and this may be what you're looking at to pay out of pocket. That is what I mean when getting a clear picture about your finances, because you know, you have a child who's going to need speech and occupational and physical therapy, and the school says they're going to get, you know, they'll build in, I don't know, 4 hours a week into an IEP, but your doctor's recommending that they get, you know, 8 hours a week. Well, where are you either going to spend the money on an attorney and advocate to try to get the IEP to meet that difference in 4 hours, or are you going to pay for the therapy out of pocket, or are you just going to say, well, we can't do it? Making an informed decision is much better than getting to the situation going, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, and then making no decision at all. So if you can talk to these organizations that say, when you have a child with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, they might need more physical therapy, or they might need assistance with their gait, or you might need to get some orthotics or something. And oftentimes this is what the insurance will pay for. This isn't, you know, these other things the insurance won't pay for, or you have to buy it first and then get reimbursed. Well, it would be nice to be able to budget all of that and know that it's coming instead of getting hit with that bill all at once. That's my perspective anyway. And that's what I mean when I'm saying get a clear picture about your finances. That is what I'm talking about. I'm not saying you should sit down with a financial planner and figure out, okay, you're 30, how much you need when you retire, you know, how much is it going to cost your child to go to college? All those things are important, but the reality is for those of us whose children have disabilities or complex health needs, it's not really on our radar. What we're more worried about is, you know, my child's, you know, uses a G-tube, which, you know, how am I going to get the food for that? What's covered, what's not? My child needs a wheelchair, but I was told the insurance company only pays for a new wheelchair prescription every 3 years. What if my child grows faster than that? How am I going to pay for it? Those are the kinds of questions that I want people talking about and thinking about with their finances. And then the special needs trust and estate planning is important at all life stages, because again, speaking from my personal experience, my wife died really young. She was in her mid 40s when she passed away. She died of a sudden illness. I was on active duty, and we had done all the planning for me not coming home. I was on submarines, then I was on an aircraft carrier. I did a tour in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So I was in a lot of places that were not exactly friendly. And there was, you know, a lot of reason to believe if something was going to happen, it was going to happen to me. So we planned for that. We didn't plan well, but we did the estate plan for me not coming home. We didn't buy enough life insurance. I didn't have enough insurance on either of us, but we did some planning, and the little planning we did was for me not to come home. When my wife died, I didn't know what she wanted, I mean, in writing, in terms of, does she want to be extreme measures taken? You know, where does she want to be buried? Any of that. So I made the best decisions I could with the information I had. It did mean I took her off life support after a week. She'd spent a week in the ICU, and I took her off life support. It remains the hardest decision I've ever made. And it's a decision I would not wish on anyone. And it was further complicated because I really wasn't sure just how extreme did she want to go with regards to trying to keep her alive. So I did the best decision I could make given the circumstances. So that's what I mean when I say why it's important to have estate planning and special needs trust and things like that. The other thing I screwed up on is I had an UTMA for my son, which meant that when he turns 18, the money that was in that account would come to him. And that's really crappy planning, because my son, you know, had a diagnosis of autism since the age of 5. And if I knew better, if I knew back then what I know now, I wouldn't have set up the UTMA. Now, when I set up the UTMA, there wasn't an ABLE account. That wasn't something I could have done, but I could have put the money into a third-party trust or just not put the money anywhere. I didn't have to save money for him at the time. Now you do have the option of ABLE accounts or other tools, and that's where talking to somebody who understands what the diagnosis means, what it could mean. A diagnosis of autism doesn't mean a child is never going to work or live independently. The same thing with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. You could, and many do, live very rich and meaningful lives and work, and they're working. So it really comes down to talking it out with a planner. We've got this diagnosis. What is the worst case scenario we should be planning for? What types of things can we put in place? So that is what I'm recommending to do right at diagnosis. I'm going to pause here to give people a chance, if they have questions, to ask before I dive into the school years. In comments, am I talking too fast? Is this a good pace? Things like that. So any questions or feedback is welcome at this point.
Thanks, Eric. We do have some questions I would like to pass your way here. First question is, in most cases, autism diagnosis doesn't come alone, but may have like ADHD or attention deficit only, seizure. So how do we handle these together? What is your suggestion in handling these during adulthood? Thank you very much.
So I will get to adulthood down the road. In terms of what to do when you first get the diagnosis, understand it's not a death sentence, right? I mean, there's a lot of great coaches out there now that can work with young children and teens, even adults who have ADD and ADHD. Some of the best creatives out there have that diagnosis. They're out there and they're making their own path. It all comes to teaching individuals the tools that they're going to need when they become adults. And the earlier you can get that intervention by giving them those tools, the better, because your brain is a little more plastic, I guess is the term. I mean, you're a little more, in my experience, it was easier for me to learn things when I was younger than it is now. So the more you can expose your children to tools and give them the tools, and surround yourself with people who will give you the grace if you're the individual on the spectrum with ADHD or seizure disorder, to give you the grace. And if it's a seizure disorder, then do you qualify for a support animal? Does it make sense to try to get a support animal? And again, it's looking for those resources, and the earlier you start, the better. And then as you get into adulthood, hopefully what you've done is you've built this very strong foundation to where you know what resources are out there, you know who you can reach out to, and then you lean on them the older you get. I hope that answers the question. And I'm going to get more into adulthood as I get towards that slide.
Okay, thank you. So next question, and does allude to an adult, a young adult. For a 23-year-old who was diagnosed with as a child by Kennedy Krieger, what's a good resource to get an updated diagnosis to support requests for services as an adult?
So for an adult at 23, you're probably going to have to pay for a psychological test on your own. The physician I'm most familiar with in Maryland, and I'm sure there's other really great physicians out there, but the one I'm most familiar with and I recommend all the time is Dr. Rebecca Resnick, and her company is called Resnick and Associates. She and I did a podcast probably a couple of years ago now where she explains what psychological testing is, but it is going to be private pay because of the child's age. The other option could be going to DOORS, which is Maryland's Department of Vocational Rehab, and asking them for a psychological test in terms of what they will only give a psychological test to show what types of supports would be needed for employment. So that test wouldn't necessarily help you apply for a Medicaid waiver, but it could help you figure out what supports are needed for employment. But if you want to get your own testing done, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. I think it costs somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000, and I could be off on the pricing, but it is going to have to be private pay. I don't know of any private insurance or Medicaid that pays for that.
Okay. Next question, can you say something on other arrangements besides guardianship, such as supported decision-making for those who are not very much disabled so that they will have some rights?
So I get more into supported decision-making and guardianship and the alternatives when we get into we get into high school and adulthood.
Okay. What are the terms DVA and CSS, if I heard those correctly?
So DDA is the Developmental Disabilities Administration. That is Maryland's Medicaid waiver provider. Administrator. There's different providers, but DDA is the one that takes Maryland's Medicaid dollars and pays provider agencies or self-directed families for supports. So when my son has a budget of about $250,000 a year for his supports, that is paid by Medicaid, and that checkbook is handled by the Department of Developmental Disabilities Administration, or DDA, in Maryland. The Charlie Sierra, and that is the coordinator of community services. That is going to be your, for lack of a better term, quarterback. So DDA has the checkbook. Your CCS is going to be the one that's helping you find agencies to work with. They're going to be the ones that are doing the evaluation for your child, and they're really your go-to for all things Medicaid waivers in Maryland.
Okay, thank you. And a couple more here. If you could please repeat who can give a picture of financial needs in the future for an adult child with Down syndrome.
That's a little harder. I mean, there's a lot of financial advisors out there who can help you plan for the financial future. Some of the ones I refer to most often are Michael Beloff in Connecticut. He's one of the ones I recommend a lot. Mike Walther in Illinois is another one I recommend a lot. And Jeff, I can send you some names for financial advisors.
That'd be extraordinarily helpful. Yeah.
So I'll send you those after the.
We have a couple here at Elville and Associates that we encourage. I can include those in a list in my follow-up message as well, if you'd like. But yeah, certainly, Eric, if you have anybody, that'd be great. So a couple more briefly here, then we'll move on. What happens when the person on disability reaches Social Security age?
So I will talk about that when we get into adulthood.
Okay, and last one is, should you rely on planners contracted by DDA like service coordination, or are there other independent planners? If so, who?
So probably gonna get some hate mail for this, but I don't see service coordination or any Medicaid waiver provider as a air quotes planner. What they are is they're people that provide a service. They are going to provide you residential services, meaning they will give you a place to live. And when I say you, I mean the individual with a disability. They're going to give you a place to live with the supports you need to live safely. That could be an apartment, that could be a group home, that could be staff in an apartment that you're paying for. They will provide you with personal supports, which are going to help you do your activities of daily living and functional daily living, like brushing your teeth, buying groceries, keeping the house clean. They're going to provide community supports, which is getting you out into the community, finding you hobbies, and just helping you really get to know your neighborhood, things like that. And then they're going to provide you with vocational supports, which is find a job, keep a job. What they are not going to do is they are not, and if there's an agency out there that is doing these things, I'd really love to hear about it. But what they're not going to do is they're not going to give you legal advice about how to plan, what you should be putting, how to do an estate plan, what type of estate plan you need. They're not going to give you financial advice with regards to how much life insurance you need, how much money your child's going to need. And to the best of my knowledge, they're really not helping you figure out Social Security or Medicaid, Medicare. The first thing I said, the estate planning, well, Elville and Associates is obviously going to be a great resource. If you don't live in Maryland, there's, the Academy of Special Needs Planners has a website where you can find attorneys in the state that you live in that work with disabilities, that are very familiar with disabilities. Another great resource is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Again, if you don't live in Maryland, or if you're looking for, if you want different options, those are two websites I would go to. For financial planners, Jeff and I said we would share you some names. For the other planning, Rebecca Rubin, and I'll send Jeff her email. She does a lot of great things in Maryland to help people. And then I have a couple resources to help people apply for Social Security that I'll send to Jeff as well.
Thank you, Eric.
Is that it, Jeff?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so let's dive into the school years. And I'm going to preface all this by saying this is not my area of expertise. I am not an education advocate. I'm not terribly, if I'm being completely transparent, I'm not a huge fan of special education. I felt at times that it was little more than at times I felt it was a babysitter for my son. I didn't feel it was really doing a lot of great things for him. So that's my bias. I'm owning that bias, and I'm hoping I can still help you navigate it by connecting you with the right resources. So the IEP 504 plan is what your child is going to use to get the supports and services they need for a education, a fair education. It's not meant to help them live independently. It's all geared towards, are they going to get an education? And some great resources for if you want help with your IEP or 504, go to COPA, the Council of Parents and Advocates Attorneys. I don't remember what it stands for, COPAA, but they are a great resource to find a professional who's been trained who can help you with your IEP or 504 questions. Rights Law also does some great training if you are looking for resources around the IEP and 504. The school is there to support your child. And I don't know of any teachers, I've never come across it, maybe they're out there, but I've never come across a teacher who got into education because they hated kids. Every teacher I've ever met got into the job because they really love children and they want to help children succeed. So no matter how frustrated you may get with your schools, please try to remember that. These teachers are doing the best they can. They have constraints that are put on them by administrators that they're trying to serve as many people as they can. So if you don't feel that your child is getting the attention or the education that they deserve or that they should have, you have every right to challenge it, and you have every right to go hire a professional and bring them in. I will put a caveat to that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So don't go in, if you go in there guns blazing, don't be surprised if you don't get the results you're looking for. Try to go in and be amicable and friendly and collaborative instead of going in there making demands right away. And I would just ask you to think about put yourself in their shoes. If somebody comes at you and they come at you hard and they're just like, you need to do this, is your first response to be very open and say, yeah, I really want to help this person? Or is it shutting down and saying, who do you think you are? I mean, I know where I'm at, and it's certainly not being flexible and friendly. So, I would just ask, if you are going to work with your IEP team or your child's 504 team, please be collaborative. therapies, music, occupational therapy, etc. A lot of those can be built into the IEP. By the same token, it may not be appropriate to have, you may have to pay for some of these out of pocket to get the support you need outside of the school environment. In Maryland, there's something called low intensity support services, or LIS. There are 2 rounds that you can draw. It is a lottery. So you put your name in a hat, as long as you're not already receiving any other Medicaid waiver services, and then you will get a scholarship for $2,000. And then that scholarship can be used for a variety of things. It could be therapy, summer camp, etc. You're going to start talking about diploma or certificate, and this is where the school can do a psychological evaluation. And then when you roll into high school, at age 14, you can start to transition plan. And you really need to start transition planning at age 14. So that means, what is your child's life going to look like after they leave high school at 18 because they get a diploma, or at 21 because they are staying in school until, and they're just aging out on the certificate program. I encourage every family to have their child get a state ID, even if the child is not going to drive. The Maryland state ID, it's not very hard to get. You can, but I encourage you to get it. At age 14, you can apply to DOORS for pre-employment transition services, PREETs, and that is where the child at 14 can start learning job skills, getting an assessment done to see what are they really good at, what do they like, what types of challenges might they have, and then they can work over the summer and start getting paid, and they can start working real jobs and building their resume. The introduction to law enforcement doesn't have to wait till high school. It can be done younger. I didn't do this, and although I would talk about it all the time, and then I had an incident where I had 2 Frederick police officers bring my son home. Everything worked out great, but that was the impetus. That's what it took for me to reach out to the non-emergency number and say, hey, I want to let people know that I have a child with a disability. These are his limitations. This is what happens if he's engaged, or if he feels stressed out, he's going to shut down. This is who he is. This is what to expect. The college planning, maybe it's not appropriate for everybody, or maybe you want your child to go to school and get non-credit courses, or maybe they want to get a degree. These are all conversations that the earlier you have, the better, because then you can start working with the IEP team on what skills do they need to help your child develop to meet these goals. If the goal is driving, plan for it to take longer than what it might have taken you to learn how to drive. Especially if you live in like more urban counties like Montgomery County or Howard County or Anne Arundel, where there's a lot of traffic. That's not quite the same thing as learning to drive in Carroll County, where it may not be as busy. So what kinds of resources are out there? Maybe Pathfinders for Autism could be a great resource to help about this, getting the driver's license, or maybe you can go attend one of their seminars about how to talk to law enforcement. Maybe you can start going to transition fairs. I think every county in the state has a transition fair where they will start introducing you to a lot of what I'm talking about here, and you can sit down and talk to agencies and really get to know what they're doing. But that's the time to start doing it, when your child is 14, 15, not when they're 20, 21, getting ready to leave high school. So now at age 14, 15 is really when you want to start doing that, and working with voc rehab and getting the case open with PREETs and things like that. So I'm threw out a ton of information again, and I'm going to pause because once I get into 18 and older, there's a lot of information, and a lot of the questions from earlier were about adults. So I want to make sure we have enough time. I can really do a deep dive into that, because it seems like there's a lot of questions there. But I'm going to pause here.
Thanks, Eric. The only new question or statement that we have here is from somebody that mentions COPAA, which is the Council of Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates. Not sure if you'd ever heard of that or had any experience with them.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. I didn't know what the acronym stood for, but yeah, COPA.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, I
So
like them a
that's it
lot.
for now. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I like COPA a lot. I think they're a great resource. All right, so when your child is 18 years old, if they leave high school, their supports won't start until age 21. So if you want a job coach, you may be able to get job coach through Doors, but Doors is a short-term solution. They're really there to get the individual into the job, and then they're going to back out over a period of 3 to 6 weeks. They're not there to be ongoing support. So they may give the person a job coach once they get the job, but if that person needs ongoing support and they're not eligible for the Medicaid waiver yet because they're 19, then, or they just weren't approved for the Medicaid waiver, you may have to pay for that job coach out of pocket. You can apply for SSI, Supplemental Security Income, the first day of the month that your child turns 18. So if your child turns 18 in July, on July 1st, you can apply for SSI. And the reason you want to apply for SSI as soon as the child turns 18, if they're disabled, is because you want to get them, one, it's $914 a month, and for many families that can help if they get the full federal benefit. The other reason is if they have a pretty significant disability and it's clear that this disability is going to impact them for the rest of their life, they may qualify down the road for the disabled adult child benefit. And the disabled adult child benefit means that when the parent retires or becomes disabled, then the child will receive 50% of the parent's Social Security benefit. So if the parent is going to get $2,000 a month in Social Security, then the child will receive $1,000 a month. And and generally speaking, if you only have one child who's disabled, it will not affect the parent's Social Security benefit. When a parent dies, that benefit will increase from 50% to 75%. So if the child is receiving $1,000 a month, when the parent dies, the child will receive $1,500 a month. They will keep their Medicaid, and 24 months after they start receiving the extra benefit, the $1,000, they will automatically be enrolled in Medicare. So they will have Medicare, Medicaid. If they're under the age of 26, it's very possible they could have their parents' health insurance, employer-sponsored health insurance. If one of the parents is working, they could also, if one of the parents was a federal employee, they could have the federal health insurance for as long as that parent is alive. If one of the parents retired from the military, they could have the health insurance from the parent who retired from the military for the rest of the child's life. And I want to say if they have a parent who's retiring from the military, the child could also receive 55% of the parent's pension, but you have to make sure you apply for that. So that's a lot of information. I'm going to pause to take a breath before I go into everything else and make sure, because Social Security usually has additional questions, so I'm going to give people a second to ask questions about Social Security.
Thanks, Eric. Nothing yet.
Okay. So every child who is born male in the United States has to
One second here, Eric, if you don't mind. It looks like we have a couple just came in. So first question is, what happens if the 75% goes over $2,000?
It can't, because it's 75% of the individual's benefits. So if instead of $2,000 you were getting $4,000 from Social Security, then your child would get $3,000. It's going to be 75% of whatever the parent's benefit was.
Okay. Okay, and next question is, can you repeat the last piece you said about the pension?
If you have a military member who is retiring from the Navy, from the military, sorry, I'm Navy. If you if they are retiring from the military, they have the option of leaving their survivor benefit plan to their spouse or to their spouse and child. If their child is disabled, they can leave their survivor benefit plan to their disabled child, even if the child is an adult. That was a law that changed back in 2016. And right now, I believe there's an open enrollment. So if you did retire from the military, but you did not select survivor benefit plan, I believe you can opt in now, but you have to pay for all the years that you missed. I would want to do some homework on that before I take that for gospel, but I can tell you definitively, if you haven't retired yet and you have an adult child who's going to be disabled for the rest of their life, you can, and I would argue you should, leave 55% of your pension to your child in the form of survivor benefit plan. It has to go to a first party special needs trust, and that is when you would need to talk to an attorney to make sure you have the right type of trust document written up. But yes, you can leave a military pension to a disabled child.
Okay, and looks like we have two more that just came in. Can Social Security be deposited directly into an ABLE account to avoid that $2,000 cap?
No, not right now. So if that's what they meant, what happens if your DAC is too much higher than 2,000? Then you would still have to get the account below $2,000. I was thinking income, not asset. So there's two tests you have to pass when you're when you're receiving SSI and SSDI. So for SSI, it's going to be your SSI will be reduced by $1 for every dollar you get in under an income. So if you start receiving disabled adult child benefit in the form of SSDI, in the example I used where you're getting $1,000, your SSI is going to be reduced. So because $1,000 is more than $934, which is $914 plus $20, the first $20 are ignored, you will no longer receive a check from SSI. Instead, all of your money will be SSDI. The $2,000 limit is an asset limit. So you cannot have more than $2,000 in your name to qualify for Medicaid or SSI. So in the example I gave, if you're getting $3,000 a month from SSDI, then you would want to make sure you pay all your bills with it, or have it go into a first party trust, or or into a savings account, and then the savings account or checking account transfers it to an ABLE account. Right now, you cannot deposit Social Security directly into an ABLE account, not yet. But you can take money from a Rep Payee account and transfer the money from the Rep Payee to the ABLE account. I do that with my son's account all the time. So if you have a Rep Payee account because you have a child who is receiving Social Security benefits, you can take that money and transfer it from the Rep Payee account to the ABLE account. So I hope that didn't confuse people, but no, you cannot move money you cannot deposit Social Security directly into an ABLE account yet.
Okay. It looks like we have another one here. If both parents work, which one will the child's benefit be based on? Just the first to retire and receive SSI?
Trying to think how to say this without making it more, the first person to retire, let's say dad and mom retires first, and her benefit is going to be $1,500. So the child, when mom retires, the child will start getting $750 a month. And then dad retires, and his benefit is $2,000 a month. So what will happen is the child will automatically start collecting based on the dad when the dad retires, because it will start with who retires first or who goes on disability claim first, and then it will default to who has the higher benefit.
Okay. Couple more here. If retirement Social Security benefit from a parent is $1,000, they would no longer get SSI, correct?
No, if the Social Security, if a Social Security retirement for a parent was $1,000 and the child was getting 50% of that, the child would only get $500. So if the child is receiving the full federal benefit of 914, then and then they ignore the first $20. So then now the child is getting $480 a month in SSDI. They would take the $914 of SSI minus the $480 of SSDI, and they would receive $430. Somebody check my math, but $430 in SSI. Because the end result is they would still get the full $914.
Okay. My son has epilepsy and was able to work when he was younger, but his condition has worsened to the point that he no longer can work. We are beginning the process of filing for SSDI. His father will be retiring in about 5 years. Would he get 50% of his father's retirement, or would SSDI still be in effect?
This is a tough one, and it's this is where I would recommend working with somebody from a Social Security expert, like an attorney, because the answer is it depends. Because he's going to apply for because they're applying for SSDI, then it means the individual has earned credits on their own work benefit, and that makes it somewhat unlikely that they're going to qualify for disabled adult child benefit. Although there could be an argument that because the disability occurred before the child was 22 years old, they may still qualify for disabled adult child benefit. And that's where you really need to get an expert involved. And a resource I go to a lot is NASSR, the National Organization of Social Security Claimant Representatives, and Elville and Associates may have an attorney who's an expert in Social Security too. I don't know, but NASSR is a resource I go to try when I'm looking for professionals who can help with a case like this, because this is a really particular situation, and it's really going to depend on how many work credits the individual has, when was the epilepsy diagnosed, how much documentation do you have for the progression of the disease, of the disability. There's just a lot involved there.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for all the information. No more questions for right now.
Awesome. So I left off at selective service, and this is something I see a lot of people overlook. If you have a child who is born male in the United States, they need to register for selective service or the draft between the ages of 18 and I think it's 22. If they don't, they could run the risk of no longer qualifying for federal employment or FAFSA. And some of you may be like, well, my child has significant disabilities. I don't care. They're never going to go to college. I still recommend doing it because a lot of states and the federal government are making a big push to hire people with disabilities. They're making a real big push to do that. And you don't want your child not being able to get a job with the federal government, which has phenomenal benefits, or a state government because the child never signed up for the draft. If they have a disability and they sign up for the draft, what's probably going to happen is you're going to get a phone call from a recruiter. You're going to tell the recruiter, my child is disabled. My son is disabled, because women don't have to file for the draft. My son is disabled, and the recruiter is going to take you off the list. They're never going to get called. They're never going to get called up to go deploy or be drafted because of their disability, if they have a significant disability. I think it's just easier to do. It takes like 2 seconds to go to the website, get it done. Voc Rehab, if you don't have a case open yet for pre-employment transition services, at age 18, you're applying for vocational rehab. And again, open the case, get the case open. If you have a case open with Voc Rehab and you're receiving Social Security benefits, SSI or SSDI, you can apply for benefits counseling. And that means a benefits counselor will sit down with you and help you understand how much you can work and earn without losing your benefits. And that is they're paid for by Voc Rehab because they really want people to go to work and make, eventually they would like to see people work enough to come off of Social Security. They're not going to kick you off Social Security if you're working. And the benefits counselor can really help you figure out how many hours can you work, what happens if you do overtime, does it make sense to work because you get better benefits? You know, that's what the benefits counselor can really help you do, and Voc Rehab can help you get placed for that. The guardianship support decision making, Maryland did pass a support decision making law, and you know, as one of our questions was earlier, is that you know, it's really a choice for the family. I am my son's legal guardian. I made that choice because I felt that he's ill-equipped to do support decision making. You know, I don't want him signing contracts. I don't want him. I just felt that the guardianship was the right answer for our family. Within the guardianship, I still let him make all of his own choices, except for medical decisions. But by and large, I have very little say in what he does. If last year he didn't want to go see a doctor or a dentist, even though I really wanted him to, he's 23. So short of me restraining him and trying to throw him in the car to take him there, it's not going to happen. So I respected his decision. Don't agree with it, but I respected his decision to, opt out of working for healthcare. And now what we're doing is his staff and I are working with him to determine what are his concerns, what are his fears, why doesn't he want to see a doctor, why doesn't he want to see a dentist, and addressing those to get him to a place where he's comfortable that he'll be able to do it. Again, the major medical decisions I made. He had to have a rod put in his chest because his sternum was pushing against his heart and his lungs. That was not open for discussion. It was, we're going to do this, this is why. But by and large, I try to give him as much leeway as possible. But you may decide support decision making works for you, and that is fine. There are a lot of tools out there to help you build a support decision making team. I can't tell you how to decide if it's right for you or not. I think you need to talk to an attorney and to get a better understanding of what is involved with a guardianship. What does it entail? It is a legal proceeding. It does mean you go before a court, you go in court, you go before a judge. Your child is going to be assigned an attorney, and the attorney will represent your child. I encourage you to seek legal counsel, even if you're not using the attorney to go through with the guardianship proceedings. I still think you ought to pay for an hour or two of the attorney's time to make sure you understand everything that's involved with guardianship. And if I remember correctly, when I got guardianship of my son, and this was five, almost 6 years ago, I had to go through a course through the state of Maryland. That was a prerequisite to getting guardianship. Children can vote. People with disabilities can vote. They might need supports. Housing is a very, very difficult situation. It's that way around the country. There is not enough affordable or accessible housing. I don't have any magic bullets for you. You can get on the waiting list for a housing voucher. Certain cities like Rockville have their own vouchers outside of in addition to the state. Housing is something that you're just gonna have to figure out. I will give you some examples of what I'm seeing people do. One example is, like I mentioned earlier, you're working with an agency. The agency is providing residential supports. Those residential supports either look like a group home where somebody is, and then maybe it's not called a group home anymore, but somebody is living in a house with 2 or 3 roommates and staff. And they all live in the house, and the staff is helping them, and that's where they live. Another option could be an agency has an apartment, and maybe that individual is living in the apartment alone, and they have staff, or the staff is living with them, and it's all paid for by the agency. Or like what I'm doing. My plan is to have my son live in my house. The staff will not live in the house, but the staff will come in work with my son during the day. Right now he gets 13 hours a day in support, and then they'll leave. And then by and large, my son this will be his house. To do that, I'm going to have, I already have yard people. I have housekeepers. I'm also going to hire, as I get older, I'm going to hire a property manager to keep up with the house. There's some models where you have 2 or 3 families getting together to buy a house, and they create an LLC, and they buy into the LLC, so they're all equal owners, or there's an ownership interest, and then the LLC owns the house. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this. You have Main Street in Rockville that has built a big apartment building. You have ILO, Integrated Living Opportunities, I think is what it stands for. Again, in Montgomery County, where they're building pods out for people to buy into and find housing. There's a lot of different options out there. What the right option for you is, I have no idea. But there's a lot of different options. What I can tell you is, because it's so hard to find affordable and accessible housing, you really need to start thinking about it sooner than later. I mean, it really should not be something that you're waiting until you're 70 or 80 years old to figure out and go, oh crap, what am I gonna do with my child? That's not fair to your child either, especially if they're gonna leave, if they're in their 40s or 50s, they've been living with you all their life, but the plan is when they die, they're gonna go into a group home. That's not fair. They're gonna go from this really comfortable environment that they're used to a place with living with strangers. So if you think the long-term solution is a residential solution, start working on that now. Start incorporating that in your planning now. And that's my housing soapbox. I'll get off it and I'll put it away. And I'm sure there'll probably be questions about it, but there are housing vouchers you can apply for. More often than not, those housing vouchers don't have any funding, and it can be really hard to get. So they do exist. It's kind of like the golden ticket from Willy Wonka. If you get one, great, but they're really hard to get. I do encourage everybody, parents, children, siblings, I encourage them to freeze their credit. It's really easy. Experian, Equifax, and wow, I always blank on this. But the 3 credit agencies, you're gonna wanna freeze your credit. It's pretty simple to do, and it doesn't stop anybody. If you have a credit card, it doesn't stop them from stealing it and using it, but it does stop them from opening credit in your name. And when you have a child with a disability, that's really important. You don't want them having their credit get stolen, especially if you're not keeping in track of it. And then the education piece, do they want to go to trade school? Do they want to go to college? If you have a child who in Maryland is receiving Social Security and they go to a Maryland community college, they may be able to go tuition free. There's some rules. I'm not going to go into all of that, but there is a program in Maryland where if you have a child who is receiving Social Security benefits, they may qualify to go to a community college tuition free. Caveat, there's more research you have to do on that. Just know it exists. Before I get into age 21 and up, I want to pause here and see if there's any questions. We're getting down to the wire here, so I want to make sure I give everybody the opportunity to ask their questions.
Thanks, Eric. A couple from just after you ended the previous section. Can you repeat the initials for the association you mentioned? NOSCER, possibly?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's November, Oscar, Sierra, Charlie, Romeo. And again, I'm gonna send you a list of all these after our meeting today, Jeff. I'll probably get to you later this evening because I want to send you links as well. I don't want to just send you abbreviations.
Yeah, that's tremendously helpful, Eric. I always send out, for those that are part of our webinar series frequently, I always send out a substantive follow-up message with follow-up information. So anything you're able to send Eric is great. I typically do send that out the very first thing the next morning, including the video link from the presentation. So thank you. Next question, is the person assisting with benefits counseling the same person assisting with benefits planning? Thanks very much.
Probably
I'm
not.
sorry, it looks like she's, I apologize, this person just corrected her message to say, is the person assisting with benefits counseling the same person assisting with disability planning? Thank you very much.
So it's one piece of the disability planning puzzle. I think of disability planning as including financial planners, attorneys, benefits counselors, myself, Rebecca Rubin in Maryland, Social Security attorneys. All of them have a part to play in this bigger piece called disability planning. Benefits counselors, they're really hyper specialized on Social Security benefits. You know, the Ticket to Work program, work incentives, what's out there for you to start your own business. You know, all of the programs that Social Security has to encourage people to find a job, keep a job, and get off Social Security. That is what benefits counselors are going to help you with.
Okay, it looks like those are all the questions for now. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, so once we get into 21 and over, this is when the majority of people are going to be on Medicaid waivers. If you live in Maryland and you sign up for the Medicaid waiver before you leave high school, then what Maryland does is the governor sets aside money for all transitioning youth. There is a budget for transitioning youth in Maryland. So if you are a child transitioning from high school into adult services, the money is there and earmarked for you to pay for your first year of supports. But you have to be enrolled in the Medicaid waiver and you have to be approved for services. In a perfect world, you would have started having this conversation about who your providers are going to be. Are you going to do in self-directed versus agency? Meaning, are you going to manage your own budget? Are you going to hire and fire your own staff? Are you doing all of that on your own? Or are you going to use an agency? All of that would be discussed and decided upon before your child turns 21. I tried self-directed for a while. I decided I didn't like it. It is a full-time job, even if you have a support broker. And it's just a lot of extra work that I didn't want. Some parents like it. Some parents like the level of control it gives them over hiring people. I thought that was important to me, but what ended up being more important to me was actually having staff for my son. And I just didn't have the bandwidth or capacity to find people because I got ghosted, I think 30 or 40 times when I did interviews, and I got fed up. So shifted over to an agency. I haven't had any problems with staff, knock on wood. Another thing that I really hope you're doing before your child turns 21 is stop looking at them as just their diagnosis. They are people. They have likes, interests. Many will want to have some kind of romantic partner. You know, I see many parents who have a hard time seeing their children as adults. Maybe it's because of behaviors, or maybe it's because of IQ, but they may still look at their 30 or 40-year-old adult child as a child and not as a 30 or 40-year-old adult male or woman who have wants, needs, and desires and deserve to live their life. So I would encourage you to think and get them involved. That's what a person-centered plan should really be about. It shouldn't all be focused on wants, needs. And I will be the first to tell you, I think DDA's person-centered plan is very clunky, but it's better than nothing. There are consultants out there that you can hire if you wanted to have somebody help you build a better, in air quotes, person-centered plan. But you don't have to. You know, it really is just as simple as asking your child, what do they like, what do they want, things like that. And then this goes into the estate planning side. What do you want to leave for a legacy? Do you have other children that you want to leave money to? Do you have charities that you want to support? Do you have other goals that you want with your money? You know, that all needs to be thought of and built in. Do your children want to be involved? Don't automatically assume that because your child has a brother or sister, they want to be involved, or even if they want to, don't assume that circumstances will never change. Maybe that 19, 20-year-old brother, sister really wants to be involved, but down the road, they get married, they have their own family. Maybe they may want to be involved, but they may find other demands on their time, and that's fair. So don't be careful not to guilt your child's siblings into feeling like they have to be there when you're not. Start thinking about that. If the individual is capable of sharing their wants and wishes, what do they want for end of life? Do they want to be hooked up to machines? Again, based on what they can understand. But don't assume because somebody uses an AC to talk or to communicate that they haven't thought about, do I want to be hooked up to machines for the rest of my life? Or do I want a blood transfusion, or they should still be given the opportunity to talk about what their end of life wishes are. And they should have an estate plan done. That even if you're a guardian, you should be having these conversations with your children and helping them flesh this out. If your child is going to age out of your health insurance, start thinking about that. Dental and vision can be really hard to find for Medicaid. So maybe you need to get them a private policy, or maybe you're going to, again, like I mentioned earlier, your federal employee or your military, so you're getting them enrolled in those benefits. Some of those you have to do before you retire. So it's better to get that in place before you retire to make sure it's there. And shop around. Don't necessarily say, I'm going to get the cheapest insurance just for, because I want to cover my child and I want to make sure I can pay the premiums. Make sure you work with somebody who really understands what the health insurance plan is going to cover to make sure your child is getting the health insurance they need. Yes, Medicaid will cover most things, but they don't necessarily cover everything, especially things like therapies and stuff, because a lot of therapists will not accept Medicaid. So you have to take that into consideration. Do the doctors that your child is seeing now, do they accept Medicaid? Do they accept Medicare? If they don't, what are you going to do? You probably need to look at getting a different private policy. So we had a question earlier on about what happens to Social Security when you turn 65. Well, if you're on Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, then it just becomes Social Security retirement. You get your benefit amount doesn't change. The way you receive it just changes names. It goes from SSDI to Social Security retirement. If you're on SSI, you stay on SSI. Nothing happens. At 65, you continue to get SSI, Supplemental Security Income. If you didn't earn enough credits, you're not going to get SSDI. If you didn't earn enough credits, you're not going to get any retirement funding. You're only going to get SSI at age 65. So that's everything before I get into my diagrams about how everything works together. So I'll pause here to let people ask questions again.
Thank you, Eric. Let's see here. A question for you. Are you leaving the house in a trust or to your son? You want to answer that or not?
I'm leaving the house into a trust, and I'm giving the trust the ability to sell the house if it becomes too much house for my son, or my son decides he'd rather live in an apartment. I'm going to make sure the trustee has the capability to do that.
Okay. All right. Would you be able to share some lists of trade schools that are also in Virginia?
I don't know much at all about any kind of schools, college or trade schools. That's not my area of expertise. Candidly, I don't know if there are any in Virginia or in Maryland.
Okay. And just last comment here, this presentation is really helpful. Your personal experiences are so helpful to hear. Thank you for offering this webinar.
Awesome. I appreciate that
feedback. That's all for now.
So the next two diagrams are just to show you how everything works together. On this diagram, you have a special needs trust, which typically pays for big expenses, new TV, furniture. It'll take distributions. Maybe you're paying a guardian salary if that's something that you have. You could have a trust. You could have a trust protector or a co-trustee. The trust protector is somebody that can hire or fire the trustee if the trustee isn't doing their job. And that again, work with an attorney and all that to determine if that's right for you or not. That special needs trust could be a trust that you paid for and you had an attorney draw up. It could be a pool trust. It could be any number of things. You could be taking distributions out to go to an ABLE account, and that ABLE account can be used for qualified disability expenses. For example, food, housing. What I'm using the ABLE account for with my son is I've used it for dental bills. I've used it to buy him a computer. What I do for food right now is I have them, and I didn't say this during the presentation, but you do want to enroll when your child becomes 23. You want to apply for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, for SNAP. And when you get food or food stamps, when you get those, you can use that to pay for food. And then you can use the ABLE account to buy additional food. What I do instead is I take some of the money my son gets from Social Security and I put it on a TrueLink card, which is not connected to his ABLE account. It's a separate account. So I do have to keep the account below the $2,000 limit, but it's a reloadable Visa account. And what he does is when he wants pizza or McDonald's or whatever he wants, he can go out, buy it with the TrueLink. And then I don't care about showing that it's a qualified disability expense or not. He can just use it because it's a Visa card. He doesn't have to show that he's following any rules. But that's an example of what I'm doing. A TrueLink card is another example where it may not be for everybody. And in fact, in Maryland, I think Maryland ABLE uses TrueLink. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to check out Maryland ABLE's website. And I'm sure Kelly Nelson will be presenting again. She does a great job. I've heard her present for Elville before. And you can ask her about how ABLE and TrueLink works together. But that's how I use it. I use the ABLE account, and my ABLE account is in Virginia because Maryland didn't have an ABLE account when I got my son his account. And I can't be bothered to move it back up to Maryland because it's not broke. Why fix it? So that's why his account is down in. That's why that's why it's where it is. And then you have the Rep Payee account. You have the money from Social Security come into the Rep Payee account, and that's what's paying the daily, weekly expenses. And that's where I'm using the TrueLink account from. Is the Rep Payee account funds the TrueLink card, and that's what he uses for the daily, weekly expenses, like like I said, his pizza, Burger King, whatever. So that's one way. That's how I do it. And then this is just an example to show you how you might think about funding a trust. You can fund it with life insurance. You can fund it with investment accounts. And again, you can use living expenses, things like that. But this is just meant to, and you have all these slides, so I'm not going to beat them to death, but I'm just trying to show you how everything works together. I do appreciate everybody, attending this. I'm trying to leave the last 5 minutes for questions. If there are additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. But thank you, everybody.
Eric, thank you so much. As always, I think this is maybe the 4th year we've done this presentation, and
I think so.
just want to say how grateful we are for you always being willing to spend your time with us and sharing such a great presentation with so much information, and sharing your experiences, as one of our attendees said, is so helpful to everybody. Let's see if we have any final questions here. I can read it since I forgot my glasses today. Just want to share the website. I think it's college.net for college trade options, one of our attendees. Nice. So thank you for that. We'll check that out. Hello, which agency/provider are you using to help with the DDA funding after 21 years old?
So I'm going through Optimal, and I'm in Frederick County, so I'm using Optimal to do my. They're my provider agency for for my son's staff. When I was doing self-directed, again, you don't have it's just you and your CCS and your support broker. So I didn't have an agency back then. Now I'm using Optimal. I'm pretty happy with them. I don't know if they're in other counties. I can only speak for Frederick.
Okay. And a correction on that website, it's thinkcollege.net. That's the website she was referring
Awesome.
to. Do you have any recommendations for Maryland attorneys?
Elville and Associates. It's.
I didn't send that question. Yeah.
No, I mean it's. You guys have a lot of attorneys there, so the odds are you're going to find somebody that meshes with your personality. When you're shopping for an attorney, regardless of where you go, do a couple things. Talk to families that have already done their estate planning. Find out who they liked. And then when you find out who they like, go to the individual's website. Do they talk about special needs planning? Or are they a generalist that says they can do anything and everything, and maybe they only do 1 or 2 special needs trusts a year? I would argue you don't want to go to a generalist.
Right.
But if you find somebody that they like and they do special needs planning, then the next thing to do is when you're interviewing them, do you feel heard? Do you feel like you can have a very frank and open discussion about your situation with this attorney? Because this is going to be a relationship that you're going to have, and it's going to require you to show your underwear drawer. I mean, you have to have a you have to feel like you really can trust this person. It's not just a business transaction. You really have to make sure you trust the person.
I completely agree with everything that Eric said there. So, yeah, here at Elville and Associates, we focus in special needs planning. Stephen Elville, especially. Lindsay Moss also maintains her practice in special needs planning and elder law. So, yeah, you want to come in, talk to a couple of attorneys. We encourage it, but our consultations are free to discuss your needs, answer all of your questions, have us understand your situation, help create a path forward, as we always say, and give you an idea of how you might want to move forward. So we look forward to speaking with you about it, and let us know if you have any questions. Always happy to be a resource to you here at the firm. And thanks for your interest in being here today. Let's see if we have any further questions here. Excellent presentation. Your speed was great and your personal examples were great. Thank you so much, and I hope you will continue providing us such webinars. Thank you again.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll keep doing it as long as you keep asking me back.
We will, indeed. And next question, why age 23 to apply for SNAPs?
I don't know why. That's what the state told me when I applied for my son. They told me, because I applied when he turned 21, they told me to come back when he was 23. I'm sure there's a reason that has to do with him and household and stuff. I don't know. So I'm going by what the state told me to do, and I'm just passing it along to everybody else.
Okay. All right. So we're at 11:30, and now would definitely be your time to get any last question into Eric. I'll say, as far as our webinar series goes, we have a couple more before I head out on vacation for a little while, and then we'll be starting back up in July. Next Tuesday, we have Understanding Estate and Trust Administration, which we do on a quarterly basis. That's next Tuesday, the 13th at 10 o'clock with Stephen Elville. And then we have a special presentation on, let's see, it's Thursday, June 15th at Busboys and Poets in Columbia at 5 o'clock. We're partnering with the Center for Elder Justice and Education, Officer Andre Lingham, who's the founder of that really great organization. Financial exploitation, frauds and scams targeting older adults. And we've offered that presentation a couple times over the past few years, through our webinar series, but we're going to be doing it in person at Busboys and Poets on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So it's going to be a really great presentation and a great evening over there on the other side of Columbia. So come out and join us. Registration is required, so you can visit our website events page to do that. And then we'll be coming back the second week of July to get our webinar series kicked back off again. Eric mentioned Kelly Nelson of Maryland Able, always a great resource as well. She'll be coming back in September for her Maryland Able presentation, and we always look forward to her information. She has some updates for us as well, I believe. And I'll be sending out my follow-up message with the video, the slides again, and some of the great resources that Eric alluded to in his presentation. So Eric, thank you again. Pleasure as always. And for our attendees, thanks for being part of the Elville webinar series. We can't do it without you. And we'll see you again soon. Have a wonderful day.